Good afternoon, everyone. It's like folks are trickling in here. Welcome to today's webinar, Exploring the 4 Stages of Organizational Growth. My name is Emily Sandilands. I am the community builder here at ZingTrain. I'm going to be your host of sorts today. I'm thrilled to be here with today's presenter, Katie Frank. Hi, Katie.
Hi, everybody.
Katie is ZingTrain's managing partner, as well as one of our fabulous trainers here. We also have Elnian Gilbert, who's one of our trainers. She is behind the scenes. She's going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A with me. Speaking of Q&A, we have, if you look at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A button. Feel free to submit any questions you may have throughout the duration of the webinar today. We will get to those during the end of the presentation. We are coming to you from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Katie and I are on opposite sides of town today in Ann Arbor. We would love to hear where you're tuning in from, so feel free to send your location there in the chat box. We can kind of get a roll call and see where everyone's coming from. Okay, we've got Portland, Phoenix, fantastic, Buffalo, New York. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Keep sending those. We love seeing where you're coming from. So as I said before, we're going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes presenting today, and we're going to leave some time for Q&A at the end, about 10 to 15 minutes. So that should cover the format of today's session. If we don't get to your question today, we will get back to you with answers in the days to come. We are recording this webinar, and we will be sending out the recording and the slides in the days to come. So be sure to look out for that in your email inboxes. And I think as far as housekeeping goes, we are all set. I'm going to turn things over to Katie to get us started.
Awesome. I saw some familiar names in the chat. Tracy Wolf and Jan Molinaro. Welcome, and welcome to everyone else too. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all. And this is a topic that is really something that has been a good guiding post for us over many years, the stages of organizational growth. And we've used it a lot over the last 38 years, especially so, and it's been really critical for ZingTrain over the last 6 months as we've shifted into a new stage of growth since the pandemic has begun. So I'm excited to be sharing this tool and this lens with you all. So here's what we're going to be going over during our webinar today. So you'll be able to identify stages of organizational growth. So we're going to go through those 4 stages, and I will tell you what those are in just a moment. And then describe leadership characteristics that are needed in each of those respective stages. Think about where your organization is in terms of those 4 stages of organizational growth. And then also think about your own leadership style. And then we've got a lot of great resources to use for follow-up to keep the conversation going. So in terms of an overview, I know I had not heard of Edgar Schein when I had started at Zingerman's 15 years ago. And Edgar Schein is the one that came up with these stages. And something that he shared is, well, before I get into something he shared, it's a little background on Edgar. So he taught at MIT in their graduate program since the 50s. And in fact, Edgar Schein is still alive. He's 92 currently, but he had degrees from University of Chicago, you'll see Stanford, and also Harvard. So he was very well educated and also was a thought leader early on in these areas: organizational behavior, change, leadership, mostly on corporate culture, and some call him the father of organizational culture. And again, since he had been doing research in these areas since the 50s, he has written many, many books, one of which I have on the screen here. And one thing that that kind of gave us pause as we learned about Edgar Schein and his thinking is that he raised a really critical question regarding the best style of leadership. And to give a little framing on that, he shares, one reason so many different theories of leadership exist is that different researchers focus on different elements. At one level, all of these theories are correct because they all identify one central component of the complex human situation that is leadership, analyze that component in detail, and ignore others. At one level, all of these theories lack a concern with organizational dynamics, particularly the fact that organizations have different needs and different problems at different stages in their evolution. We tend, he went on, to treat the topic of leadership in a vacuum instead of specifying what the leader's relationship to the organization is at any given time. So this was really a paramount shift in terms of, thinking about what is the right style of leadership. And the critical question, the shift is, there is not a right leadership style, but instead thinking about what leadership style is best suited to the level of organizational development your organization is in right now. So this is akin to arguing what is the right parenting style. What works for a 4-year-old is outdated at 8 and is near certain failure at 14 and a disaster at age 24. So themes run through them, love, respect, patience, and support. But close supervision and frequent overrides that are right for a 4-year-old would be beyond absurd at 24. So again, the right style of leadership at one level of the organization's development is going to be obsolete if you try to use it at the wrong point in the company's history. So Shine helps explain why what had worked so well for the business at one point in the organization's existence has ceased to be effective later, and how doing what was effective in that startup phase has actually become a liability later. So Shine will describe some skills and strengths that are needed at each of the respective 4 stages, and think about what you might gravitate towards as a leader, and think, how does that match up with where the organization is right now? So let's talk about these 4 stages of organizational growth. So the first one is creating. It's the leader as animator, meaning, the leader is at the center or core of all that's happening in an organization during the creating or startup phase. Building, this is, you're getting a little more mature. The leader is the creator of the culture, where you're being a little more mindful of what you're doing, why you're doing it. You're getting other like-minded people around you to help support your work. Maturing is another stage of growth where the leader is the sustainer of the culture, where we might need to call in even more support and help in specific areas of the organization. And changing is the leader as the change agent, meaning we're going to be shifting from the way we're currently working back into that creating or startup mode. And we're going to talk through all 4 of these stages, but I just wanted to give a high-level overview of these. So the progression through these stages is not linear. You can be at 2 stages at once, 2 stages at once at one time. You might have one aspect of your organization that is mature, where it's a product line or a service that you've provided for many years and it's really solid. And you might have another aspect or another product line that's new, in which that might be in the creating or startup mode. And then the other thing is, you might have one foot in one stage and one foot in another. There's not a right stage. The key is, as you navigate the stages, is to look at what strengths and skills a leader needs in order to help the organization succeed at each respective level. And what we know is that strengths can lead to weaknesses, and what's helpful at one stage, again, will likely be detrimental at another. So again, the point is, in order to lead and grow successful organizations, we find it most helpful to first know what our strengths as leaders are, what stage we're in organizationally, and then what help do we need if what stage we're in is not where we most gravitate towards as a leader. What help do we need in order to get the help and support around us to make sure that we're effective as leaders in our organizations. So again, knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So what stage are you naturally good at? Where are you in your development? What do you need help with in order, again, to be the type of leader that you need? What type of leader does your organization need for you to be? And you don't ever have to move out of a certain stage. So like the maturing stage, for instance, you can be in that maturing stage for quite a long time, especially if you are profitable, you are continuing to innovate, you can stay in that stage for a while. If you like staying in a startup and creating, you can certainly stay there. You know, just we think of it like lights on your dashboard in your car. When you see that light come on, that yellow light come on, it's just kind of an indicator. It just kind of raises your antennas. So maybe you're in creating and you're thinking, we might need some more systems. Maybe our staff is requesting a little more communication. You know, these are some of those yellow light clues on the dash. And we're thinking, all right, well, yeah, that's important, but ... Just know that eventually if we continue to ignore those signs or signals, that it's gonna cause us trouble later on. So it might be worth exploring some of those cues and clues as we go along. So again, different parts of the organization might be at different stages, and you might be in some part of building and some part in maturing, depending on which division or department that you're thinking about for your respective organizations. So hopefully I provided enough context for those stages, because I'd like to poll you all with a question and think about your own organization. And if you've got multiple departments, if you're part of a large organization, then think kind of like whatever the largest department or your largest revenue stream is. And if you'll answer the question in the poll there. So which stage is your organization in currently? All right, we've got about 78% of the vote, and it looks like changing wins the day. So 39% are in changing, although the results are pretty evenly distributed. Maturing is 24%, building at 25%, and then creating at 12 or startup. All right, thank you all for sharing those things. I know at ZingTrain, we were in a mature situation where we were a 26-year-old business, had really solid systems. We had a really well-seasoned staff that had been with us for many years. And when the pandemic started, the work that we were doing in terms of in-person training was now going to not be possible for the foreseeable future. And so we shifted from mature into changing, because we converted most of our training into virtual options. And so I imagine that since 39% said changing, that some others might be also in the same boat where, the way that you work also is changing. So, all right, thank you all for doing that. And then one other question I'd love your help with before we get into the first stage. So if you could put in chat, so the first stage is creating. So leading a leader as the animator or the originator. What strengths do you feel you would need in order to have a startup, to be a leader in a startup? If you could put in chat, and then Emily, if you're willing to share some of those, that would be great.
Happy to.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like vision, lots of energy, engaging others, tenacity, creativity, enthusiasm, fear management, confidence, brevity, perspective shift, flexible, high risk tolerance, money, persuasiveness, innovative, persistence. Got lots of great ones here.
All right. Thank you all. These are really helpful and I think spot on. Yeah, teaching your vision. Yeah, it's like you're a messenger, early on. You've got to share that vision, keep saying it a lot, especially when things are shifting as you go very quickly. And so in that first stage, creating or the leader as the animator, you need a lot of stamina, energy, a lot of high energy, emotional and physical stamina, because you're going to be working a lot of hours. There's going to be changes coming at you really, really quickly. That personal charisma, I think to Jeff's point around sharing the vision, sharing that vision a lot, sharing where kind of your dream. What is your dream? How do you imagine it? You're sharing that a lot with your team. You might have one or two friends and family members that are helping out. Maybe you have one or two staff members, sharing it a lot. And there's a lot of learning through osmosis during this time because you're working side by side with people, again, working long hours, and it's a very immersive experience at a minimum. And then shouldering, you'll see high proportion of the workload and the stress. So it's all on the owner, the person that's originating the business. All that stress is falling on their shoulders. And at this point, you have very little data to go on. And so you're trying whatever will work. And you're rolling with the punches because as soon as you find that finally you get that really great hire that's going to really help solidify things. And then they're like, well, I found another offer, or I can't work on the weekends, or I can only work for these 6 hours during the day. And you kind of get deflated, and then, a cooler might go out, and then that grant that you thought you were going to get for a new business didn't come through. So there's all these things that are coming at you really quickly, and it's a lot of adaptability in this first stage. Now, if you are the kind of leader that needs a lot of data to make decisions, the startup phase is going to feel like agony because there just isn't a lot of data. You're going on your gut. You're having to make quick decisions, and you're not sure if it's going to work out or not. So in terms of potential weaknesses for a leader in this creating or startup phase is if you require a lot of data before making a decision. And again, you might really gravitate towards being in that startup phase. And there's also times you can be in the startup phase for a year, 2 or 3. And then when you start to see some lights on your dash, signs that it's time to move to the next stage, that you're still in business. You might have some time to breathe and realize how tired you are. You're like, oh, wow, okay, I think we're gonna make it. I think we're gonna stay in business. And now kind of thinking about what's next. And everyone's getting paid, including you. So those are some signs when maybe it's time to start getting some things more systematized and we move into the next stage, excuse me. So this is building, and some key leadership strengths you'll see on the slide there is that you really need to go for, well, we find it to be helpful if you go from, you're leading from a lot of intuition to, okay, let me start to vocalize more of how I'm thinking about things so that I can get other people around me versed in kind of my approach. You're gonna start to hire other people, and that whole just leading by example will become more detrimental if we aren't vocalizing or documenting why we're doing certain things. We aren't going to be able to work all the shifts all the time. So delegation is really critical. And when we delegate, that is one vehicle to get clearer on our expectations and provide some support and guidance to the people around us so they know how we're thinking about things. And then again, sharing your thoughts on how and why. Now, some potential weaknesses. For better or worse, the leader's personality is all over the organization. If you've got a leader that's really creative and not really fabulous with follow through, then that will probably be pervasive in the people that you attract and hire, and may be in terms of your staff, where you've got a lot of creatives around you and we don't quite see things all the way through. Or maybe you're a list maker and you really like to get things crossed off. In terms of being innovative or coming up with new ideas, that might be more of a challenge. So whatever the personality of leader, it's going to be prevalent in the ways that you engage with your staff, and again, the way that you hire. And then you ebb and flow from, in a startup phase, it's just kind of like no hold barred. There's not a whole lot of structure, no systems in place. And you go into like everything has to be documented. Every customer situation needs to be documented. And you can kind of swing the pendulum in the other direction. So we don't want to get into a micromanagement situation, but that can be possible in this scenario, because you want to make sure that when you're not there, people are doing, again, thinking about things in the way that you want them to think about things. And it's hard to let go of your baby, if you will, like it's always been done this way and this is my business. And I want to make sure that the customers are being taken care of in a specific way. So we can ebb into micromanagement. And so one real life example where this happened was where we had our Roadhouse restaurant that I would say was either in building or maturing, and they were really solid, really operating well. And the head chef at our restaurant left the Roadhouse to open another Zingerman's business. He opened Cornman Farms. So Kieran Hales was the head chef at the Roadhouse, went to open Cornman Farms. And a lot of the staff, I wouldn't say a lot, a handful of the staff were really excited about the farm, and they thought, I want to go be a part of that. And so they applied, and the farm opened, and they went from a really mature business with a lot of systems in place to a startup that had very little infrastructure, and they were building the plane while they were flying. And it was a big adjustment. And so for those that really like structure and really like those systems, to go into that startup situation, turnover was really high because how people like to work was different. In that startup, it was just basically like wear a lot of hats, do a lot of different things. And so if you really like that structure and kind of stability, being a part of a startup will be an adjustment. So in terms of when it might be time to shift out of a building phase into the next step, which is maturing, you're starting to have disagreements on should we meet or not? Are we having too many meetings or not enough meetings? And again, for those more innovative, creative types, they don't want to be pigeonholed into a system. They want a lot of autonomy. And for those that like more structure, like we need more communication. We need to have meetings so that we can all be on the same page. So there starts to be some creative tension. You've got managers at this point, but often the decisions will fall back on the leader to make that final decision. And sometimes still a lot of the kind of expertise, the content expertise about the work is kind of held in that leader's head. And so part of the work of this next transition is to get out of the leader's head and documented some things that are important. All right, maturing. So this is a real key shift because in a building stage, you are documenting systems, you're getting things standardized, starting to get things out of that leader's head and documented on paper, be it checklists, recipes, ways that you want things handled. And in maturing, this is when you make a big adjustment into assigning entire areas of responsibility. When you have only 5 or 6 people on staff, you don't need an HR professional. It's just like, well, who's going to do the hiring and who's going to advertise the post for the job and so on and so forth. It's very, very loosey-goosey. But as you grow and now you have 100 staff and maybe you have, 15 or 20 managers, now we might need some more HR oversight. Maybe we hire an HR consultant. Maybe we want to bring in an HR manager to do more of our hiring and onboarding and training. And so, especially if you've got a business that requires some technology, maybe we need an IT professional. So you might need to start to assign entire areas of expertise to a new hire. Now, when you are used to kind of, as the leader, having your hands in a lot of different parts of the organization, you've grown to a point where you can't realistically or feasibly be in all those areas all the time. And so you've got to be able to not only delegate, but also trust that the person that you've hired is going to be able to execute what you want. So you see accountability on there. Collaboration and initiative. And if you want to help the other people succeed that you've named into those respective roles, agreeing to adhere to certain processes will help get us to some success. What we know, though, is that it takes sometimes 2 or 3 new hires to get to the one that we feel like is a fit for our organizational culture. And as stressful and as hard as it is to consider that, we've just seen it over and over. We had a number of HR professionals in our organization before we found a woman named Patty McGraw, who was just incredible as our HR director. Same thing in our accounting department, and we've seen it play out in a number of our businesses. We can describe our culture and we can do our best to convey that in our communication, but there's nothing like being in here. So just know that sometimes it takes a couple hires to get to the right, I wouldn't say the right fit. It's not the right fit because that would insinuate that there's a wrong fit, but I would say the best fit for our culture. And then in terms of potential weaknesses, so at maturing, this is, you've gotten to a certain point, you've got departments, you've got department heads, and again, you start to see more of an organizational structure. And you can get comfortable here, and again, we can be in this phase for the stage for a while, but you can get stagnant. You can be operating in a certain way, playing not to lose versus playing to win. So sometimes innovation is not at the forefront. Whereas when you are in that startup, it's really an edgy time, and there's a lot of great energy and just it has a certain feeling to it. Things have become routine, and there's just not a whole lot of thinking outside the box. Like we're just comfortable at this point. And again, you can stay at maturing for a while, and maybe we don't need to innovate because you've got a real leader with the products that you're selling or the services that you provide, and you, again, can stay here for a while. But if you start to see some cues on your dashboard, on your car, if your sales are up but your profits are down, meaning that your expenses have creeped up to a point where maybe, you know, we're not innovating or having new products to sell like would be helpful. Your unique goods or services are now being copied. So a lot of competition out there. And you've achieved your original vision. That might mean it's time to shift. And it's harder to make bold decisions. At this point, you might have a lot of staff. You're not making quick changes. You know, you've got payroll to pay at a certain time, and hopefully we're paying our bills on time. And so if we want to make an organizational change in this stage, it takes a while because there's a lot of things that are already ingrained and embedded that are going to have to shift if we want to make some adjustments. All right, and then changing. Leader as the change agent. So some key strengths. I would say this is where ZingTrain is currently. At first, when the pandemic started, we thought, oh, we're more in the creating or the startup phase. But the more we thought about it, it was, you know, we have a mature business, 26-year-old business. And we have a client base that we've been, you know, curating for the last 26 years. And so we think that changing is likely where we are right now. But the way that we were operating with in-person training was going to be obsolete until we can safely gather again. And we knew that if we wanted to stay in business, we were going to need to pivot. I shouldn't have used that word. We were going to need to make some adjustments to in-person training so that we could stay in business and also meet the needs of our customers in a way that people were taking in information virtually. How can we provide strong content in a format that our customers could take the information in? And how could we expand our reach beyond our existing customer base and hopefully reach more people? So you'll see that key leadership strengths needed in this changing phase because we were going from training tried and true, solid outlines, materials that were developed, systems that were solid, to an entirely new way of conducting training. So a lot of emotional strength to help the business get through the change. You know, there was a lot going on in March and early April, and it was just like, okay, every day, all right, what are we gonna do? And we had furloughed our staff, all of our full-time staff for 5 weeks. And so Maggie and I would talk every single day and just connect on, all right, what are some ideas? What can we try? And so the willingness to change our own behavior to be the change we want to see happen. And we needed to let go of what was and really embrace what is. And that was much different. And so I feel grateful because I had a thought partner in that we were starting with yes. How can we get to yes? How can we help our customers? How can we work to stay in business? How can we bring our staff back, or as many as we could, so that we can continue in this field that we love? And then the strength to remove elements of our old culture that weren't working anymore. So we really needed to change from like, okay, this is how we do things, to, okay, we are offering an entirely new product. How can we market it? How can we sell it? And we are still working on updating systems to help facilitate that. So potential weaknesses, and weaknesses isn't kind of the right terminology, but it's how we've been framing things so far. And I would say when you have a well-seasoned staff that has been with you for a long time, and you say, okay, we're now going to start doing virtual training, you know, they might be like, I don't know if this is a medium I like to train in. I don't know if this is going to work for me. And so you have staff that are considering, you know, what's in this for me versus what's in the best interest of the business. And so we try to be as transparent as possible about kind of what our financial goals are and what kind of the next 6 to 12 months looks like. We've done visions to help make sure that we're all on the same page, and we are working together to make this thing go. So some of the challenges, though, is that when you have staff that are used to a certain way of operating, and in changing, you're completely remaking the business, that can be hard. And there's not, again, a right or a wrong. Everyone is entitled to their own feelings and comfort level with the way that you're doing the work. But it can be hard because you really need to kind of go for broke, if you will. Like, we are back in startup mode, but people are used to things being really well oiled, and they're really used to things going well. So that's why we think we are pretty much in changing, because we were a 26-year-old business, but our revenue is more in lines of a newer business. I wouldn't say startup, because we do have a good sales base so far, but it's just a big shift. So thinking about like Kodak would be in changing probably in the 90s, early 2000s, when they continued to make film, and not see, okay, with a lot of people taking pictures on their phones. I mean, who would have thought? When I had my flip phone, I was never thinking like, I'm not gonna also have this camera. They did not change. Yellow Pages hasn't changed. I still get Yellow Pages in the mail. So those are examples when people have not innovated. And there have been other businesses, though, that have innovated. I think about, well, you know, taxi service, for instance, did not innovate. But, you know, out of these situations comes Uber or Lyft or Airbnb or Carvana. any of these industries that have bloomed up because we have not been responsive or changing to customer needs. All right, I've done a lot of talking. I'm gonna pause here. I would love to do another poll and think about, based on these stages, what stage do you feel most comfortable leading? If you'll answer that. Keep them coming. All right, we're getting close. All right, let's share the results. All right, building won the day on that one. Almost half of you said building. And then a pretty equal distribution on the other three. I would say I am most comfortable in the building stage also. And I think part of the challenge here is where's your business and where are your strengths organizationally? And like for us, we've got the benefit of a lot of thoughtful business leaders in our organization. And so I contacted our partner at Mail Order, Mo, who has started a number of businesses. And I said, hey, Mo, will you talk to me? I just want to make sure that we're thinking about the right analytics at ZingTrain. Again, right analytics is probably not the right thing, but as an entrepreneur, what are things that you look at when in a creating phase? So this is when calling on people around you that might have expertise or strengths in where your organization is right now, calling on those folks because they can provide incredible insights, and we can get locked into, well, it's always been done this way, and this is how it goes. And so really call on people for some help there. All right. I'm going to go to one other, some key takeaways before we move into Q&A. Because I think I've said a lot of these things, but I just want to make sure that they're all encapsulated in one screen. So again, organizations need different leadership styles at different stages. And like I described the strengths, the thing is, if we are in startup mode, again, you're making a lot of quick decisions without a lot of data. And then as you gravitate more towards building and then you get into maturing, if you were to make off the cuff quick decisions in a mature stage, you would drive your staff crazy. They're used to like stable, steady as she goes. They're not used to like upheaval and chaotic and all that energy of a startup. And so what we're finding is, our leadership strengths in one stage can definitely be detrimental in another. So number 2 there, you'll see we are most comfortable leading in different stages. And so identifying where are you most comfortable. And then you'll see the leadership strengths in one stage become detrimental in another. So like Paul, one of our co-founders, he is a serial entrepreneur. And if we had him in a situation if we were to ask him to like create a lot of systems for something, that would not be playing to his strengths. But Paul puts people around him that are good in creating systems and structure, and that can help strengthen the organization. That's why he and Ari were really great business partners, because they have different strengths. But if Paul was our only leader and we needed a lot of structure and systems, it would have been a mismatch because we do need structure at certain points. Then you'll see our choice as leaders is to either evolve our leadership skills or to get help. So, all right. I'd love to go to some questions. I saw at least one in there. And John reached out before we even got going on the webinar. And so his question was, how, if at all, do we tweak or modify these leadership requirements in each of the stages during a pandemic crisis, especially given the uncertainty of the timing of a return to, quote, before times, knowing that we really won't be returning at all, that there'll be a new normal in the after times, and of course, we don't know when that will be. So can we run different scenarios, both in timing and projected permanent behavioral and societal changes that will impact our specific companies? But what is suggested here, since there is just so much uncertainty about timing, permanent restructuring, et cetera. So great question, John. I can at least share how we're approaching it at ZingTrain and within our organization, and I hope that it will provide some insight. And if this is not a satisfactory answer, then we can talk more offline. First and foremost, we know what our cash balance is. Without cash, we can't stay in business. So when we talk about in open book finance, cash is king. So first of all, do we have the capital and the money that we need in order to operate? And even at a lower level of sales, how long can we last before making any drastic changes? I would also say customer feedback is really critical, especially if you're trying out new things, new delivery methods, new ways in order to reach customers. People are really open and receptive at this time, and I think that's really helpful. I know that as we've done more virtual training, people are more gracious, and not that we don't have high expectations for our training, but if we had a technical glitch, people are pretty understanding, and we of course want to continue to improve, but really capturing that customer feedback and acting on it is critical. I would say looking at your sales data. So what products are winners for you? What's lagging? What do we need to let go? And what do we need to bolster? And then, excuse me, continue to try new things. Parts of our organization have really been thought leaders in terms of trying to reach customers in the way that they want to be contacted, or selling to them in a way that they're requesting. One, for instance, our bakehouse right down the sidewalk from ZingTrain. They only allow, for social distancing reasons, 4 people in their small retail shop at a time. So people would start to line up down the sidewalk outside in the middle of the summer. And while Michigan doesn't get too hot, it's pretty uncomfortable midday and on, you're in direct sun. So they put out 3 tents so that they don't have to be in direct sun. They have a door greeter who will start working back in the line. What did you come for? Let me see if I can get that started for you. The other day on Labor Day weekend, we had a lot of people that were coming in that were families, and so they were occupying that 4-person minimum pretty quickly. The line was getting bigger. All I needed was a baguette and I think one other thing, and I was able to get that. The person took my order, went in and got the breads, came back out, was able to help me with a handheld credit card machine. I didn't even need to enter into the store. And so things like that. So not only are they doing in-person with responsible social distancing limits, they also are doing curbside, they're doing delivery. You can order online, which was something that they never even considered before because of the complications, but they figured all those things out. So I think the biggest thing for us to stress is figure out ways that your customers want to engage with you and try those things out. And so really being open to, we haven't done this before, but let's give it a try. So I hope that helps, John. All right, Emily, do we have other questions?
Yeah, sorry, I popped back in. I couldn't help myself. Thank you for that answer, and thank you, John, for that question. Well, we're getting a ton of fabulous questions, so I'm just gonna go ahead and dive right in to some of them. So Sadie had a couple of questions. The first question Sadie had was, can you talk more about the difference between leading by example and having your personality embedded in the business?
So leading by example is one of those things where it's good if the staff pick up on the things that are kind of like the good qualities, but I think sometimes the staff don't realize why things are operating well. And unless we are vocalizing what it is that is important to us and the way that we're thinking about things, then the staff may or may not pick up on the things that we want to perpetuate. And so having our personality kind of like all over the organization, knowing what your strengths are and kind of where your tendencies are, will be helpful. And then owning, like, if you're more of a creative type and you like to just start projects, but finishing them can be challenging, then you want to share that you are looking for some help and structure on completion. It doesn't forgive if you've made a commitment and don't follow through on it. But leading by example is okay if we've communicated to others what those attributes are that we're trying to perpetuate. In terms of your personality being embedded all over the organization, just see what is serving the organization well. And then if your staff are complaining or customers are complaining about the things where you're weak, not that they're like a personal attack, but you can start to see, oh, I'm bottlenecking this thing, or why does that decision have to go through me because I'm holding the process up? Figuring out, okay, I need to let that part go so that I can be in better service to our staff and to our customers. So kind of identifying if your attributes are helping to forward the mission of the organization, or if you are hamstringing or making it challenging or bottlenecking certain processes by needing to be involved in that decision, if you will.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that. Another question from Sadie. While we're giving Sadie the microphone here, can change be part of your organizational culture such that you can have organizational change while remaining in stage 3, which is the maturing stage?
Oh, sure. So if you're in maturing, you can be in maturing for a long time, and you could be trying to innovate while you're in a mature phase. I think about our bakehouse is top of mind. This is right down the sidewalk, and they're a good model of, I think, innovation as well as maintaining a strong core business. So the bakehouse has a teaching bakery. They also are, the teaching bakery started, I would say, maybe about 10 or 11 years ago. And they had a robust wholesale business already. But the teaching bakery was one way that they innovated. They do new products that they start to introduce. They work with our mail order business to bring new products on in terms of for sale in our mail order catalog. So they've got their core business that is really solid, wholesale sales for bread and pastries. Their retail shop that does a lot of business. And then they continue to innovate on the products that they sell, including product extensions like Bake, the teaching bakery, or partnering, doing more wedding cakes, or, other kind of product extensions, if you will. So you can have changes in the way that you do things in the mature stage, but you aren't making kind of like whole scale changes where you're completely uprooting all that you've known from a business standpoint. So I hope that I think about small changes in terms of product mix, or new things that they're trying, like writing a book, for instance, or writing a soup recipe book. Those are some things that I think of as new innovative things that they're trying while staying true to their core business. Emily, do you feel like that answers the question?
Yeah, and Sadie, let us know in chat if you would like us to elaborate anymore. So we had someone ask the question, which I think is a really interesting one. Can you talk about how to identify and correct dysfunction at each of the stages?
Well, Dr. Phil said long ago, if we keep having the same problems, like they're serving us in some way, like we keep repeating those same issues. So sometimes dysfunction is hard to identify because we like our problems. We keep recreating them in our relationships, either outside of work or inside of work. And so there's some times when being able to, I think getting customer feedback is a helpful way to parse out if something is working or not. Being really responsive that way. Also, having peers that are either in business, in a similar business, and asking for their insights. I think about learning and growing if we approach things as if we've got it all figured out, then we aren't going to be open to new ways of operating. And one thing that we've tried to think about in this span of 6 months is how can we start with yes? And so as we have, our team has come up with new ideas, or I've challenged the team with a new idea and asked them to embrace it. It's all getting everybody outside their comfort zone. And so really making sure that we are responsive to that feedback and that we're talking to other people and keeping a learning mindset, kind of a growth mindset, will help with those areas. I think feedback is always really helpful. So getting feedback from customers, also from your team, having regular touch points with your staff, where you can have some open dialogue about those things. And then your sales will also tell you if things are working or not, if things are selling or not. If there's not kind of an obvious reason, like we're slower in the summer months, and so our sales were a little bit lower. But if they continue to decline, that's also data. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. Whoever asked that question, feel free to let us know if you'd like us to articulate more, but that's wonderful. John says, great question, with a smiley face. So I think that was a great question. Thank you. Mary Beth is wondering, I'm curious why we don't want to use the word pivot in the changing phase.
Oh, thank you, Mary Beth. That's just because a lot of people use the term pivot. And while I played basketball and you had a pivot foot, I think it's been used a lot. And so I was trying to use something else, some other term to describe what we're up to. There's pivot, there's nothing wrong with that term. I just think it's been used a lot. So I just wanted to have maybe a more original term, but clearly it fit the bill.
Yeah, Kat says she's not pivoting, she's pirouetting, which I like. I like that. Okay, great, thank you. Jeff is wondering, after 13 years, we've had a few longtime employees begin to lack engagement this past year. While it's disheartening, I have to continue the business. Not fun, especially when you like them and they add value. Any thoughts on the subject would be appreciated.
So the first part was that they become disengaged?
Yeah, this past year.
Yeah. Well, I think if they were disengaged pre-pandemic, then I would say visioning is a great tool to see, like, what do they see themselves doing in 6 months or a year. And if they were disengaged after the pandemic started, then visioning is a great tool for people to use. One thing that Maggie and I talked about early on was that, as well-intended as our fabulous team is, no one's going to be doing their best work during this time because of all of the other stressors that are going on. Every member of our team has one aspect of their life outside of work that can be deemed really stressful. And everyone is giving work their all. And yet we still are not at some optimum level. Now, we are kicking butt, all things considered. But I always keep that in the back of my mind, is that no one is going to be at their best. If anyone has kids at home and they're doing school while also trying to work, and even if you have a partner that's managing that for them, like mine is right now, it's still a stressor. And then there's also, like, are we going to stay in business? How can we get to break even? There's that stress. And then there's, when can I go see my family? I mean, I don't need to highlight, everyone is kind of going through this, but I would say if you've got some staff that are disengaged, make sure that you're having regular check-ins. I mean, I think we have one-on-one check-ins once a month with our team. And I find that to be a helpful touch point to find out what's going on for people, where can I be helpful, what are some things that are important to them, prioritizing certain aspects of their work, and it's a dialogue. And also the vision, finding out where do they see themselves in a year, and then how can you help support them, and which might be that they're in a different role or that they're not working with you, which sometimes can be hard, but I'd rather have that conversation together and help support them than be stuck with 2 weeks notice on something.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's a great point. We have a time for a couple more questions, but for anyone who has to hop off, we will be sharing the recording and the slides with you. So not to worry if you have to scoot out for another meeting. But I'm going to get to another question here. John, a lot of questions about the change phase. So phase 4, which I think it seems like a lot of people in the chat are sort of in that phase, especially everything sort of went into warp speed with COVID. I know we sort of talked a little bit about that with ourselves as well. So John asks, when you're in the change phase, how do you deal with the "this won't work" feedback from the cautious people?
I say, let's get some data. We struggle with this on our team, and I feel like we've got a very open team where someone has an idea and we want to try something out, and the data has shown it's not really done well so far, but let's try it again. And so it's just having some limits. You know, it's basically like, okay, we're going to try this. I mean, the beautiful thing about trying things is it's a trial. We don't have to continue it forever. And for those that are skeptical, it's like, I'm going to ask you to get on board for the next 3 months. And I'm going to ask you to put everything you can into this. Because if you come in with negative beliefs, you know, it's going to be a struggle if you already are kind of sinking the ship before you've even started to sail. And so let's try it for a certain amount of time. There's one product that we're working on right now that is a trial for us, and we're going to try it through the end of November, and we're going to reevaluate. You know, let's see, what feedback do we get? Is it selling? We did a customer survey to say, what do you want? And our customers told us this is what they want. Yet prior data in like May, June timeframe showed us that that's not what people wanted because they didn't buy it. And so this is when trying things out, hopefully if it's a low barrier from a cost standpoint to your business and to customers, try it out. What do you have to lose? And for those that aren't willing to get on board, then say, you know, I'm going to need you to try this out. We're going to reevaluate at X timeframe. And then if they won't get on board, then that becomes a job performance thing. Or you can acknowledge, look, I'm really, you know, I know it's hard because we've done the same type of business for 25 years. And now we're asking you to shift it up on top of like all the other stressors. And yes, that's hard. And yes, I'm still going to ask you to go forward and try to support this for the next 3 months. Yeah. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So a lot of questions around COVID in particular. Kristen had a fun comment that she absolutely loves the change phase. She's enjoyed the COVID challenge. It sounds like a 5K, but it's not. But it is a marathon. Try stuff. If it works, great. And if not, trash it and try something else. The amount of things we've learned about how we have done things and about what we can improve on has been wonderful. So I think a lot of people, that's resonating with a lot of people. We probably have time for one more question here.
If I can just add to Chris,
yeah,
I think always looking for the gifts. You know, this has been a hard time for sure, but what are the gifts in this? And I think, at least for us, we've been able to diversify our revenue streams so that when we can do in-person training again, we'll also have virtual training to offer and be able to reach people at a further distance. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and we've been talking about it. We kicked it into high drive, so that's really fun. So we'll finish with Joshua. We have a lot of great questions coming in. We will get back to you with answers. But Joshua is wondering, what can you do as a manager or with your managers in your charge when your organization moves into a new phase that isn't a part of your or their strength?
Great question. First of all, it's acknowledging where your strengths are and that you're feeling uncomfortable, that you're feeling nervous. I think there's this misnomer as if you're an owner or a manager that you're supposed to have all the answers, and that is a bunch of crap. I want to be as transparent as possible with our team that here's where we are, this is how I'm thinking about things, and I want to utilize everyone's insights as we move forward. So if it's a type of stage where you're not feeling strong and the team's not feeling strong, then get help. You know, again, I'm going to come back to visioning, and it might sound like I'm beating a drum here, but having a vision for where you'd like to be, defining what that looks like, and then we can work backwards on, okay, like, so one part of our vision is to have robust e-learning courses. That's not something that we've designed in the past. We have tons of solid content. We just haven't presented it in this way. And so part of our vision, I'm on a small subgroup with 2 of my colleagues. We're going to seek some outside expertise in this area because it's not an area that we have strength yet. I think we can get up to speed quickly because of our instructional design background, but it's not something that right now I could say, oh, we definitely can nail that. And so define what success looks like, and then see in there, if we have aspects that we're not strong in, where can we get help? Maybe it's engaging someone around you that it does that type of work. Maybe it's hiring a consultant for one aspect of the development of that product, for instance, or getting feedback. So there's a proverb that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I've already gotten like 1 or 2 people that have reached out that have e-learning expertise. And so sometimes getting it down in that vision will help align some of those resources. And we've got to define what success is first, and then we can get those resources aligned. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. Joshua, you can let us know. So yeah, I want to respect everyone's time. We are at the top of the hour. Katie, thank you. Thank you everyone here who has submitted some great chat, great questions. We will get back to you with some answers in the days to come. In addition, we will be sending out the recording and the slides. So be sure to look out for those in your inboxes soon. And everybody have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
Feel free to shoot us an email too if you have questions. Thanks.